Welcome, I'm Todd Robbins. September 3rd, a number of wretched things happen on this day. As a matter of fact, in compiling all these lists for what I do every day here on this day in darkness, I usually have, a handful of things to talk to you about. This day, however, there are too many things, awful, wretched things that happen. So we could be here for hours if I went through all of these. So I'm just going to do a handful of them, and we'll see what gives. Okay, here we go. Let's start off with the year 1189. Richard the Lionheart is crowned the King of England in Westminster, and to celebrate, after the coronation, people went out and killed Jews. And then Richard retaliated by ordering the perpetrators to be executed. There you go. That's an interesting way of starting off a reign. And on this day in 1651, at the Battle of Worcester, Oliver Cromwell's new model army destroys the English royalist forces, mainly Scots, and it's the last battle of the English Civil War, and it leads Oliver Cromwell to go on to be the leader. However, a few years later, Richard Cromwell, his son, takes over, and I love the nickname that Richard Cromwell had, Tumbledown Dick. Tumbledown Dick. Now that's a name for you. And on this day in 1752, Britain and the British Empire, including the American colonies, switch over to the Gregorian, from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar, and they lose 11 days. And what's interesting is that there were riots because people thought somehow that the government was stealing 11 days from their lives. See, people haven't gotten smarter. And on this day in 1791, the French Revolution was going on, and the new French Constitution, declaring French a constitutional monarchy, is passed by the National Assembly. And on this day in 1783 was the Treaty of Paris, which brought to an end officially the American Revolutionary War between Great Britain and the United States. There you go. A few years earlier, in 1777, the flag of the United States flew for the first time in the Battle of Cooch's Bridge. You know, you would think that it would be some grand name, some grand battle, but it's the Battle of Cooch's Bridge. On this day in 1833, the New York Sun newspaper begins publishing, and it is the first daily newspaper here in the United States, and it was a penny press. It cost a penny, and ushered in a new form of journalism that was a little bit more salacious, covering crimes and sporting events and things like that, and also didn't really worry too much about facts. They did a good job reporting, and yet there was a great deal of whimsy in there, including the moon hoax that happened a few years later, in which the Sun reported that an astronomer had discovered a whole colony of people on the moon, and had this elaborate series of articles describing what was going on the moon. It was all a hoax, and then they fessed up to it. It was just fun. But then again, this was an era that set the tone for P.T. Barnum and his humbug, so it's kind of understandable. On this day, let's jump ahead here, 1877, the paddle steamer, the Princess Alice, sunk after a collision in the River Thames, and 645 people died. And in 1882, there was the Battle of Hanoi, and it was with the French and Vietnamese and Chinese, and several hundred people died. And so it began, the battle in Vietnam. On this day, this is really interesting and a very, very sad event. 1918, 5 soldiers were hanged, and They participated in what has been known as the Camp Logan riot or the Houston riots of 1918. They were members of an African American brigade, army troop and division at Camp Logan. And members of the African American community in Houston were being harassed by the police. Sound familiar? And the soldiers went out and protected them and fought back. And there were, I don't remember how many, but there were, I think, something like 100 of them mutinied. They left their posts, left the army there, and they were tried, and 41 were given life imprisonment, and 19 of them were executed, and on this day 5 of them were hung. It's a very sad incident in American history, and kind of shows that things don't change. So moving right along, in 1930, speaking of things don't change, in 1930 a hurricane kills 2,000 and injures 4,000 in the Dominican Republic. We are in the midst of hurricane season right now. And 1940, Adolf Hitler ordered the invasion of Britain for September 21st. That didn't happen. And 1941, it was the first use of Zyklon B gas at Auschwitz, and it was used on Russian prisoners of war. We'll talk about that gas in an upcoming episode of Abnormalcy, my podcast. And if you don't know about that podcast, just look up abnormalcypodcast.com. That's the website. It's up on all the various podcast places, iTunes and places like iTunes. And it's well worth it if you enjoy this. It's the kind of thing you like if you like this kind of thing. And in 1956, tanks are deployed against the racist demonstrators in Clinton, Tennessee. I'll just leave it at that. In 1971, the Watergate team, those burglars broke into Daniel Ellsberg's doctor's office. It was a psychiatrist. And it seemed like they were trying to get dirt on Daniel Ellsberg, the journalist. It seemed like such a big thing at the time, and yet by comparison of what's going on, the corruption in our world today, they were amateurs. And 1988, it's estimated that on this day, 50,000 Kurdish civilians and soldiers were killed in Iraq. This was at the tail end of the Iran-Iraq war, and it was the use of chemical weapons that did them in. This incident led to the later claim of weapons of mass destruction that led to the Iraqi war with Iraq in the 2000s, and stupidity. I mentioned yesterday in Beslan, in Russia, there was a kidnapping, hostage situation, and terrorists took over a school, and on this day it all came to an end with a massacre. And there were 344 people, mostly teachers and children, killed because of what happened, the storming of the school. On this day in 2017, a 1.4-ton World War II bomb was discovered in Frankfurt, unexploded, and was disarmed, and 60,000 people had to be evacuated because of this. It was the largest post-war bomb to be found, and created quite a panic. And moving right along, in 2018, the first public caning and conviction of a lesbian couple attempting to have sex by a Sharia high court in Malaysia. Okay, and then there's a number of birthdays. Whitey Bulger, the Boston mobster, was born on this day in 1929. Also, 1990 was the death of David Acker, who was a Florida dentist, not related to my friend who is a wonderful magician, performer, TV personality up in Canada. David Acker was a Florida dentist who contracted AIDS through unprotected sex and continued to practice his dentistry, infecting his patients. At least 5 of them died from AIDS that they got from him because of his sloppy hygiene and during his dental practice. First, do no harm. And on 2003, Paul Jennings Hill was put to death. He was a minister and anti-abortion advocate, terrorist, really, because he killed a doctor who had been performing abortions and the bodyguard that the doctor had had because of the threats that had against his life. And on this day, Paul Jennings Hill was put to death by lethal injection, I believe, administered by a doctor. And finally, on this day, Charlie Sheen was born in 1965. Charlie Sheen, the troubled actor, he was born on this day. His real name is Carlos Estevez, and he was born in New York City on this day, and he's the guy who made Tiger Blood famous. I hope he is doing well. Well, there you go, and there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, because I do this video for you, and you know who you are. If you do, hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications so you'll be alerted, so you can sit on the edge of your seat and wait for the next video to come oozing forth into your life. That is, assuming you survive all the wretched, awful things that will be happening to you on this day. And if you do survive, I do hope to see you back here tomorrow. And if you don't survive, well, do me a favor, if you would. As you're dying, if you get the chance, as you're dying, just do me a favor and look at the person, if there's someone there with you, and say, there's some things you need to know. And then close your eyes and drift off into the ether. There you are now. Always keep me guessing. That's what I recommend, because I'm Todd Robbins. In regards to this day today, well, good luck.